Chapter 20, Verbal Roots and Other Forms of Future. Am I there? Okay. Talking to the first chapter Hebrews, an Old Testament quotation, Psalm 102, 25 to 27. And the quotation contains a number of interesting verbal forms addressed in the current chapter. Rabbis of the first century would string passage together to build up overwhelming evidence for an argument. And a quotation from Psalm 102, found in Hebrew 1:10 to 11, is one of several the other string together to present powerful evidence that Jesus is superior to angels and worthy of our complete allegiance. This psalm particularly proclaimed that Jesus is superior based on his role as a creator and terminator of the heavens and the earth. The idea here is that, therefore, whereas angels are created, the Son of God, powerful beyond imagination, rules over the universe as a creator of all things, and therefore will wrap up all of the created order in the end. He will be the ultimate terminator. Notice especially the part of the psalm beginning Hebrew 1:11, which deals with wrapping up of the created order at the end of the age. The use of the future here are predictive in that they tell what will happen at the end of the world. The psalm states of heaven and the earth, they will perish. Further, the psalm says Jesus' lordship over the created order. The heavens and the earth will grow old, like an article of clothing, and like a clock, you will roll them up, and like a piece of clothing, they will be changed. Even though Jesus made his creation stable with sturdy foundation, he never intended the creation to last forever. In fact, the heavens and the earth, like the article of the clothing, one day will wear out to the point that they have to be rolled up and packed away because they no longer are useful. Think of the old sweatshirt in your closet that is falling apart. Jesus is so awesome in his power, and he is the one who will do that. Unlike the creation, he is the same, and his year will have no end. As eternal Lord of the universe, one who has the power to create all things and to wrap them up in the end, Jesus, the Son of God, is worthy of our worship and full commitment of our lives. Okay. So overview, in this chapter, you'll learn the difference between the verbal root of a verb, which is the most basic form, and the stem of the verb, which is appearance in a certain tense. Sometimes the verbal root is the same as the present tense stem, and other time it's not. The tense stems are not formed from the present tense stem, but from the root. And also, we have the liquid futures. So 20.1, different way of form the future. In the previous chapter, we learned how to form the future when a verb has the same stem in the present and future. This includes stem ending in a stop and the contract verbs. In a stop, for example, blapple, to blapso. And the contract verb is agapao, to agapeso. Okay. In this chapter, we'll learn about the verbs whose present and future tense stems are different. For example, balo, to below. Root and stems. But before doing so, it is important to pause and discuss the difference between a verbal stem and its root. This may appear to be somewhat technical, but you can grasp this concept now. It will make a tremendous amount of difference later on. And this applies not only to the future tense, but also to the other tense as well. This is the last detailed discussion of the morphology in the text. Exact memorization of the verbal roots and present tense stem is essential if you want to use and enjoy the language. The definition: the root of the verb is the most basic form. For example, the root of agapao is agapa. We always preface the verbal root with an asterisk. The root shows itself in the verb agapao as well as the noun agape and adjective agapetos. All verbs are listed in the vocabulary section with their verbal roots. Be sure to memorize the root along with the lexical form. For example, below, I throw. The verbal root is beta alpha lambda, bao. And the future tense is below, beta alpha, lambda, and omega, below. The stamp of the verb is the basic form of that verb in a particular tense. The verbal root lau form the present tense of luo, and the future and luso. In case of this verb, the same stamp lu is used in both tense, but in the case of balao, I throw, the present and future tense stamps are different. But the present future stamp are different. Yes. And the relationship of the present and future stamp are different. Okay, that's right. Relationship with the verbal root and present tense stamp. The verbal root and the present tense stamp can be the same, or the root can be altered when forming the present tense. In some verbs, the verbal root is the same. For example, the root agapa comes unmodified into the present tense agapao. Some verbs modify their verbal roots when forming their present tense stamp. For example, bao altered to balao in the present tense. Tense stem formed from verbal root. If you assume that the present tense stem is the base of the verb and all other tense are derived from it, you will become confused and potentially discard the sense. This approach forces you to memorize hundreds of irregular forms. However, if you learn the different tense stems are formed from the verbal root and not from the present tense stem, memorization and frustration can be kept to a minimum. Verbal root forms present, future, and aorist stems. For example, the verbal root bao is modified to form its present tense by doubling the lambda, beta alpha lambda omega balo. However, when you arrive at the future, you will see that there is only one lambda, balao. This is special future that does not use a sigma as a tense formative, but more about this later. When you learn the aorist tense, chapter 22, you'll see that it as well has only one lambda, ebalan. The point of the illustration is that if you learn the present tense as a base form, both this future and aorist term forms, stems, will appear irregular. But if you learn the root, they will become perfectly regular. This may not sound significant right now, but it is. You must realize that the present tense stem is most irregular tense stem of all. The verbal root is altered to form the present tense stem more than in other tenses put together. The present tense stem is built on the verbal root, which may or may not be modified when forming the present tense stem. And then we look at the patterns of variation. The patterns will develop as how the different verbal roots have been modified to form their present tense stem. With the correct way of thinking and with the recognition of these patterns, you will discover the Greek verb tense are not that difficult to learn. 3 patterns. We need to memorize the patterns, but not the tense stems. The pattern 1 is root not modified. We have seen that. Pattern number 2 is root modified regularly. Memorization is not required in this case either, because we will learn those rules. In pattern 3, different roots. There are few verbs whose formation of the different tense stem appear to be so irregular that memorization is the easiest answer. And we only have less than 10 irregular roots. Now let's look at pattern number 1, the root not modified. Okay, this is chapter 20.8.